In this lesson, we'll begin animating our gallop. Now, before we jump right into the animation process, what we want to do is check out the poses that a horse goes through in his run so that we can apply them to our character and make his gallop look convincing. So let me go ahead and bring up those images for you. And here they are. So as you can see, we have about 10 major poses or so that we're going to be going throughout this gallop to really make it look realistic. Okay, and one thing to note about the horse's gallop, it is an asymmetrical gait, meaning that the movement of the limbs we're going to get on the right side is going to differ slightly from what we get on the left. So this is really going to be unique. And we also see some very interesting line of actions in the legs that are really going to add to the enjoyable factor to animating this gallop that much more. So this is going to be a really exciting project to work on. Well, keeping this information in mind, keeping all of these poses as a reference right next to you, let's go ahead and work on that gallop and get some movement going on in our character. Excellent. So getting right back into Maya, we're just about ready to begin. Just want to also note that in order for this cycle not to be overwhelming to us, what we're going to do is break down the animation into sections, starting first with what we'll see in the legs and even the up and down of the upper body. And then we'll go into detailing more of the upper body, get the movement correct there from the pelvic side of it to the thorax. And then from there we'll move on to what we'll see more in the head and cervix. And our last task for the cycle will be working on the tail. Okay, so knowing those things, what we'll also do is go into a side view. Okay, so we'll go to our 4 panels and get into a side view and work on what we'd see in more of a side view first, and then we'll move to more of a front view. Okay, which we won't need to do too much work in the front view. But with that being said, let's go ahead and begin. So going off of our first pose, what we'll do is select the left control. Okay, and if you have trouble selecting it, you could always go back to your perspective view and select it from there and then go back to the side view. But we want to line up our poses with what we see in the images, and we also want to keep in mind not only getting our poses correct from what we see in the image, but we also want to use reference points to help us figure that out. So, for example, where should this left foot be in relation to the right foot, and so on and so forth. That's really going to help us really bring this animation alive and look believable for us. So here we have the left hoof coming back, the left thoracic limb coming back a bit, and notice that it's coming off the ground floor, so we could just go ahead and bring down the character's center of gravity control just to a point where we have a slight bend in the leg, but not too much of a bend, not too much of it straight, so we don't run into any popping out of the leg afterwards. Okay, so now from there, what we could do is just select our right thoracic limb and just start moving that back. Okay, bringing that back to about where it should be, as we see from our reference. Remember, keeping in mind those reference points, that the left thoracic limb is right in front of the right now, so we want to make sure that we are reflecting that in our poses. And we'll also roll back the fetlock, right fetlock, as we see in our image. And we want to keep in mind follow through as well. How is the follow through going to look? Okay, great. So once we have this pose, okay, what we're going to do from here is go ahead and move on to the left pelvic limb. Okay, and this is going to be brought back, and it is starting to come forward. Okay, but it is brought back first. So we're going to be bringing that back to about here. And if the tail ever gets in the way for you, what you could do is go ahead and go to the global control of the scene, the circle here, and go to Viz Tail. This is the visibility of the tail. You can simply turn that off, and that will hide the tail for you. Okay, great. So now we could go right back to the side view and continue posing out. We can go ahead and roll back the back fetlock for the left foot. Okay, and we're just blocking out our poses right now. We're not really concerned with how precisely how our poses should look just yet. Okay, this is just a blocking out phase, just throwing things together, and then once we like that, then we go ahead and start cleaning things up afterwards. For the right pelvic limb, we're going to want to bring that up and also roll the fetlock down a bit here. Okay, the fetlock is the horse's ankle, just FYI. Okay, and this is going to be coming down first. Okay, and also to note, for this cycle, that is the right limbs are going to be planted for a little bit longer than the left. The left will just really be pushing off. Okay, so once we have this, we now have our first pose set. Now, a rule with cycles, what we want to do is make sure we have our first and last frames identical. Okay, and being that we just have about 10 major poses, what we're actually going to do is give us a little bit of space and move our end time here to a value of frame 13. Okay, we don't want to go full 10 frames because then we may get some popping and unnatural movement. Okay, we more than likely will. So we want to make this still look fluid given the short amount of frames that we have to work with. Okay, so we're going to move that to frame 13. And also with cycles, we want to get into the habit of using odd numbers of frames. So we're using frames 1 to 13 because that gives us a midpoint, which is 7 right now. And that also helps us to lead to a seamless cycle. And we do want our first and last frames to be the same because that also helps us to lead to a seamless cycle. So now that we pretty much have our first pose, and if the grid is kind of getting in the way, you could always hold spacebar to get to the hotbox, go to display, and just turn off the grid. Okay, because we kind of have a floor already with our global control set, so that's really helpful for us. But, okay, so once we have this, now we can make sure we go to frame 13 and just make sure we have the same pose. So we could always left mouse button click and hit S from there. Or let's say if we were doing a cycle and we went to frame 3, for example, move the leg and then say, oh wait, but we need to make sure that we have our first and last frames the same. Well, notice what happens when we have cycle turn on. Of course, it's gonna the leg's gonna keep popping like that because we only have keys from frames 1 to 3. Okay, and we don't have any key to lock down on our last frame, so we're gonna get this popping. Right now, frame 3 is the last frame. But if we ever wanted to take the information on frame 1 and apply it to frame 13 without any movement occurring, okay, just maintaining this pose from frame 1, we could middle mouse button click on frame 13 and then a key from there. And notice no movement has occurred, no popping or anything like that. So this is really helpful, the middle mouse button, for other things too, like moving holds and such, but that's another topic. So once we've made sure we middle mouse button click on frame 13 and no movement has occurred, we're still maintaining this pose on frame 1, we'll hit S. Great. So now notice the limb isn't moving as it was before. Okay, great. We've maintained that pose on our last frame. Now we could go ahead and delete the key on frame 3. No longer need that. Great. Excellent. So now we have our first pose in, and we have our last frame in too, so our first and last are the same. Great, and we're making great progress right now. But let's go ahead and stop the lesson here, and in the next lesson, we'll continue this process of posing out our horse.